Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Thornborough, joined by
Rachel Jamison.
Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. We're getting rain here today.
I feel like we haven't talked in a long time. I mean, we've been doing a lot of podcasts, but we just keep interviewing other folks again, and we have been only coming together every few weeks for a podcast episode.
It's the busy days of summer.
Yeah, it is.
You've been busy, and I've been busy, and it's hard.
Tell me all about it. What have you been doing on your homestead?
Well, depends on which one. The small homestead, our suburban homestead, I've been canning and preserving and drying and making a few videos.
Yeah.
And planting some fall crops and trying to figure out what to do with tons and tons of apples and blackberries, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Good problem to have.
Yeah. That's what we did. And then we've had bees, I don't know, something about angry bees the last few days. So
what kind of bees?
Yellow jackets at the property, and here wasps. No.
Duck.
Yeah, it was a wasp. Yeah. So Saturday I was stung 3 times in the face.
What?
At the property. Yeah. I think they're
looking at you. You look like you healed all right, because I'm not noticing anything.
I ended up having to take some Benadryl because my lip swelled up because I got stung right on the lip. And then last night I got stung by a wasp in the back here at home. So I don't know. It's just that time of year where the yellow jackets are really liking the blackberries and all those sweet things. And we were picking blackberries.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know what about the wasp. They're just kind of angry anyway. So
yeah, they're stinkers. We had some, there's been a lot of bees around here. I was emptying out some raised beds, or I was taking all the beds out, a few of the beds out, not just the raised beds, but the ones in the ground. I was just cleaning them out and putting them to bed, a few of them. And there was just a ton of them down in the grass and the weeds and the stuff. And I'm clearing stuff, and they were just, I don't know, dozens of them coming up out of there. I was kind of surprised by that.
Yeah. I haven't been stung in years. I mean, it has been years and years since I've been stung, and then I get it 2 days apart. I was kind of like, what's the deal here?
I think the last time I got stung good is there was our back gate on our property, and I normally grab the handle and close it. And for whatever reason that day, I kind of just went up and grabbed the bottom of the top board. It's 2 boards that are kind of sandwiched together at the top. And so there's kind of a gap between them at the top on the top boards. And there was a nest up in there, a wasp nest up in there. And I put my hand right up on it, and I got stung several times right in the palm of my hand. And, it hurt so bad.
Yeah. Getting stung on my lip. It was right under my nose. Boy, that makes your nose run. That didn't.
Yeah, that sounds horrible.
And then I couldn't feel my lip the next day, but yeah, that was fun. That's there. And then at our big homestead, the property, we've been planting rye, peas, radishes, and battling Japanese beetles.
Really? They returned on you, huh?
They did on my fruit trees. Not as bad, but I hate the things.
Yeah, those are horrible. I mean, I've only ever dealt with them 1 year. It's so funny how never had them for years, had them 1 year, haven't had them since. And it's been a few years now. It's the weirdest thing. They just come in this swarms and travel around that way. It's kind of weird, but yeah. Of course, I'd probably aggravate the situation when I put one of those traps on my property. Those traps work at drawing them.
They do really well. But I've heard you got
a really small property. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, I've heard that. That's what I think. If I put one here at our suburban homestead, I'm going to ask our neighbors behind us have woods. I'm going to ask, can I hang this out in your woods away from all of our gardens?
Yeah. Somebody's yard or something.
You do not. It do attract them.
Yeah, they'll bring them close. And I had like I said, it filled up in a couple of days. It brought them in by, truckloads. But yeah, that's not good if you got a small property.
Right. Yeah. And I have a friend that has them out in the buckets full that he's getting is just incredible.
Yeah.
He's composting them.
Well, hopefully they're not migrating back down this way for next year, because I don't want to deal with them again. But if that's the case, we'll deal with it.
Yeah. Oh, anyways, they're not being very nice to my apple trees. And I don't know there's not much you can do other than shake them and drown them in soap and spray neem oil. And
yeah, you got a lot of young trees out there too. They're probably,
that's my concern.
Yeah.
yeah, is that they're pretty young. It's not like it has a lot of leaves on. There's not a ton of leaves on them. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're not bothering the pear trees. It's just wild to me how
Yeah. I
they
had the same
pick
issues.
specific things. So they weren't touching our pear trees. They love the apple trees. They're doing nothing with the grapes, nothing with the mulberry. They're on the wild raspberries and blackberries, and they love milkweed. Love it.
They were on my grapes quite a bit. They like blackberries, raspberries. They tore them up. Rose bushes, man, they demolished some rose bushes.
Did they?
Yeah, it was crazy how they like them. Beans, they love the beans. Of course, all my beans are gone now. But
and here I noticed they like borage.
oh, really? Okay.
My borage looks like a skeleton. All that's left is the.
Yeah. They were doing that with the berries and the grapes too. Even my grapes were getting hit really hard, which was kind of, you saying they're not bothering your grapes, but they were doing that to my grape leaves.
No, they definitely prefer the apple. The apple trees are getting hit out
and
there.
they weren't bothering my apple trees really that much, which was kind of funny. That's weird. Yeah, it's weird how they work like that. Yeah, they kind of go in.
Well, I'm hoping that this is the last year, but I don't know. I've ordered some traps, some pheromone traps, and I'm just going to very carefully place them.
Yeah. Just watch where you put them. Nowhere near where you want them.
And then we'll be composting their little bodies.
Yeah.
Apparently, birds don't really like them. So
yeah, I've never seen any birds eating them. Yeah, they're a difficult. I mean, I don't know. It's like I think there's probably worse, insects out there that could hit your property, but they're bad. I mean, they definitely, they can definitely cause some problems. I noticed when I was cleaning out those beds, I was ripping out. Now I'd been picking my summer squash. And been picking a lot of zucchini and yellow squash and things like that. And I've had a ton of it. And I'm finally just like, I've had enough, I'm going to clean out that bed and just do away with it. And there was a few stragglers in there of kind of some small yellow squash that weren't real big. I just kind of left them in there and then they kind of started drying out and rotting. Wow. I hadn't even noticed the squash bugs. I just hadn't had an issue with them because they hadn't been bothering anything so far. But evidently they found it right there at the end. The squash that I had left in there were almost completely covered in squash bugs, like hundreds and hundreds on every little squash in there. I was like, wow, that's a lot of squash bugs. So it was kind of weird how I basically
did you get your flame weeder out and
yeah, I just cleaned everything up and composted everything. But it was just kind of funny how I kind of beat them to it this year for the most part, because I hadn't even noticed one out there. And I've picked dozens of squash. And
I still have the whole pill bug thing. Still boggles my mind why.
Yeah, so I don't know. I there's bugs, but we're kind of just this year I kind of moved things around a little bit, and it seemed like maybe it took them a little while longer to find the stuff. Or something.
Well, that's good. I mean, later is good because you got most of your harvest then. So is your squash done?
Yeah, that is. Well, I have some winter squash, butternut and acorn, things like that.
That's crazy because I'm just starting to get zucchini.
Really? Oh,
and
yeah.
Summer squash.
So many. Yeah, I was sick of them. I bagged I shredded. I mean, I made a lot of zucchini bread and stuff like that too, and fritters and things, but I was just filling up gallon Ziploc bags and freezing it because I had so much of it, just shredding it and filling it up and freezing it. I don't know. I probably got over 20 gallon bags of shredded zucchini, and I gave tons away as much as I could, find people willing to take it anyway. So yeah, plenty. And I did can a bunch of I just cubed up a bunch of the yellow squash and canned it. So I put a bunch of those up too.
Nice.
So yeah, I did pretty good with the squash. I had a good squash year. Bad pepper year, great tomato year still. I mean, I actually went ahead and yanked out some of my tomato plants. But I still have a few, and yeah, it's been a great tomato year. I put a lot of those in the freezer, and we've canned a lot of stuff too there. So yeah, it's been good tomato year, but I'm getting tired of it already. And I thought, you know what? I just left the ones I left out there now are not for canning. They're just kind of for eating fresh tomatoes because I think I'm done canning them because I think I put up enough for me anyway, or at least that's what I'm telling myself because I don't want to do anymore.
Do you ever wonder how people do it if they have a longer season than us? Because I get burned out.
I
get
do
tired.
too. I'm already tired of canning already.
Yeah,
And
so I wonder how people do it with a longer season, or maybe it's just slower. Like we stuff
yeah,
as much as we can in there because we know the season's short. Maybe theirs is just slower. I don't know. Maybe
yeah,
somebody can fill us in on
we're
that.
getting it in more at once and just going at it. But yeah, and I've been doing the canning outside. I said, well, I got everything still. I mean, I just leave everything outside on the table out there and on our deck and go out there and do it because and that has been way better than using the kitchen because
Oh, yeah.
you just don't have the as big of a mess and you just don't have the heat. And so I've been just doing it all outside.
You
And
guys have been a lot hotter than us, though.
oh,
We
it's been
really have
so
not
hot.
had,
Yeah.
we've had a few days. Sunday was miserable here. It was like 100 degrees here, but that's
Well, you're
been,
not been a lot hotter. Yeah, we're going to be like that. Like Thursday, I think it's going to be pushing 100. And
but we
we're
were
not
only like that one day. And the rest
okay.
of the
Yeah,
time,
I
it's
mean,
been like in the
we've been
70s.
90s. Low 90s a lot, but high 80s, low 90s a lot. But yeah, it hasn't been. I don't think we've hit 100 maybe once.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
and,
I don't think we have. Maybe close, but I don't think we have.
yeah,
Maybe the index has been, but we haven't actually hit it.
it's felt hot though. It's felt
Yeah,
really
that
hot.
humidity really adds a
Yeah.
lot.
I've been out
So,
there a lot in it and it's felt, I don't know, it's felt really hot. So it's been one of them years. But yeah, I don't, for me, I've been dealing more with livestock lately. It seems like I've been hatching some quail. I let my quail kind of get blended. I was dealing with tuxedos and and the smaller brown quail, and I'd kind of had jumbos at one point, but they all kind of got. I let them kind of mix, and I was interbreeding a lot with the different types, and it was just a free for all of what I was going to get, and I really didn't really have any of the just pure jumbos anymore. So I actually bought some jumbo quail eggs from a guy local here, and just went back to pure jumbo browns.
okay.
Because they're just a little bit bigger. Eggs are just a hair bigger. The quail are quite, I don't know, maybe 10-15% bigger. They're not big difference, but it's enough if you're if you're going to take up the same amount of space raising quail, you might as well get as much meat as you can from them, right?
Right.
So
right.
I like having the jumbos. So I did kind of try to, purify what I'm raising again and go back to just jumbos. So that's nice. And my rabbits I just told you a little bit ago, I'm in my office right now. I've got my does that are pregnant. So, because it's really hot outside and I didn't want to put that stress on them. So I got a couple cages set up here in my little office out here in the barn. So they're not in my house, they're in my barn. So people know, I have this little office out here, but I got them sitting over here in their cages and watching me talk. So these are a good breed. I got these ones.
What breed?
These ones are New Zealand. They're a mix of New Zealand and Cali, which I've always had New Zealand, but I've never had a California New Zealand mix, and they're half and half. And there's something, they're the most, I've never had rabbits this friendly. I mean,
nice.
you carry these things around like puppies. I mean, they're just the most friendly. They love to be petted. They love to be carried. They just love it. Like my granddaughter comes out here and just handles them, and they don't.
Well, that's great.
When I had pure New Zealands, they got a little bit of an attitude. They just weren't real personable.
They'll bite you and scratch you.
They would bite and scratch. And yeah, my wife, I thought she was gonna have to have stitches one time for.
Oh my!
You picked one. I got to where I just always grabbed them, by the scruff of the neck and pick them up and kind of cup their butt so you don't get scratched, right? And she didn't do that one time. She grabbed one and kind of just held it, and it kicked down her arm, and it put probably a 10-12 inch slice down her arm, inside of her forearm. And I was like, we kind of bandaged her up, but it was bad enough. I was like questioning whether she's going to need stitches or not. It ripped her open, and they were just kind of on her. You had to be really careful how you picked them up and stuff. And now these ones are great. They're just great. And to handle.
Well, that's good to know, especially if you've got kids. I mean, it's just,
yeah,
getting that homestead kid friendly animal is always nice.
Yeah, I used to not worry about it because I'm like, I don't really want to be too friendly with my food anyway. But it is nice. It's nice when you do have to say you have to treat them for ear mites or something. You're going to pick them up and handle them and hold them, and you don't want them going crazy and fighting you, or just whatever. You're just moving them in and out, because I'll bring them from the cages to the tractor and then back to the cages at certain times, and and just moving them around and stuff. And it's just so much easier if they're friendly, So.
Right.
Yeah, I actually think it's important now. And I used to not think it was important. And I probably even said that on a podcast in the past,
right.
that, I don't handle them much, but I think it's important to handle them now and have friendlier animals that you can just kind of, do
Well, and
things
you
with
have
it.
little ones running around,
Right.
so
And if
it's
grandkids
helpful.
are going to handle them and stuff, that's right. I don't want them getting cut up or bit or something like that. So yeah, I do. I think it's important. And so yeah, been doing that. Lots of harvesting, lots of canning, lots of preserving, and
Yeah.
still a lot to go. I got to jump on these elderberries probably today or tomorrow and get these picked. I got a lot of
I saw
those.
your picture.
Yeah, I got a lot of those right now. And the birds are starting to tear into them pretty heavy. So if I want to get as much as I can, I better get on it pretty soon, or there isn't going to be any to pick because they've been lighting into them. And the grapes, I still got to harvest my grapes and start making some jelly. So
Ah,
that's what the next.
I'm
And
jealous.
they're good and ripe. I've actually been eating quite a few, and they're really good this year. They're really sweet this year. They're way better than they were last year. I think really, real lot juicier. I don't know if just the weather's been right for them.
There's something about good concords for
Yeah,
juice.
makes a great
Yummy.
juice and jelly. Yeah, really, really
Yeah.
good stuff. So that's what's happening around here. And yeah, I'm
Busy,
enjoying it.
busy days of summer. It's that
It's busy.
harvest season, like August till like the end of September is so busy with harvest. And then we go right into hunting season.
And then yeah, yeah. And actually our hunting season's already started here. And I was going to go out last week, but then I kind of overdid it that one day out in the heat, and then I didn't feel like it. And now it's so hot, I definitely wouldn't want to. So
Right.
maybe next week it'll cool down just a little bit and I can get in the woods and do some squirrel hunting because I'm getting excited about that. I love squirrel hunting.
Yeah. I think hunting is a great part of homesteading too.
I
I'm
do
on a
too.
podcast on that. And you're actually going to do a talk on
Yeah,
that.
I'm actually going to be doing a talk
Indiana.
about that at the Indiana
Yeah.
Homesteading Conference, and I think it's just a major part of homesteading. And it can be whether you're no matter what kind of homestead you have, urban homestead, or a rural homestead. I think it can be a great part of your homestead, and you don't need to own 100 acres to go hunting. I mean, there's a lot of public hunting ground. You can get in contact, which I don't want to turn into a hunting show, but yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there, and you can put dozens or even hundreds of pounds of meat in your freezer through hunting season. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's important to do if you're trying to put meat in your freezer, and can be affordable if you do it right. So,
Yeah.
it cannot be affordable if you don't do it right. If it's more about hunting for fun and trophy hunting and things like that, it can cost you lots of money.
That can get pricey.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have a fun topic today. We were both kind of like, we're doing a lot of work. We're kind of exhausted, and, let's just do something kind of fun and easy and talk about something that, I don't know. I grew up, one of my favorite shows growing up, and I've heard you talk quite a bit about it as well. One of my favorite shows growing up was Little House on the Prairie. And
Yep.
I loved it. I mean, I think there's different kinds of people when it comes to Little House on the Prairie. There's a Little House book people. There's a Little House TV show people, and then there are people who are both. And I'm kind of both. I actually was introduced to first to Little House on Prairie with the TV show, and I didn't actually ever read the books till I was an adult.
Same here. Same.
Is that how it was for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember when. I mean, what you wrote it down that it was the 1974. So
Yeah.
it was just part of my childhood
It was me too.
watching those shows. And I wasn't much of a reader as a kid because I was kind of hyper and I was more outside and running around. And then when I became an adult, I started reading them to my kids.
Yeah.
And we loved them. We read all of them multiple times. And then we did like a homeschool curriculum. And my daughter, one of my daughters plays the fiddle because we read those books. And she didn't just play it for a short period of time. She has now played the fiddle for, she is 26 and she has played the fiddle for 21 years.
That's awesome. That's
really cool. All because of Pa.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And you know what? In truth be known, we're going to talk about, 12 things we learned about homesteading watching Little House on the Prairie today. But, I would actually say that the Little House books probably have more good homesteading stuff in them than the TV show. The TV show really isn't about homesteading. It's just their life is homesteading. I mean, their life is they're living on a homestead, right? Their function is their farm life.
Yeah.
And so you pick up on things and you learn things about homesteading and you kind of get inspired about homesteading with that show. But it's really not about that. That show is really about family and struggles and faith and community and all those things. It's really more about that than it is about homesteading, but homesteading's in the background. When I was a kid, I loved that. I'm looking at the farming, I'm looking at the chickens, I'm looking at the cows, I'm looking at the stuff. And I was fascinated by it. I just loved the life. And that show was a big part of my growing up, that I got to see what, we were doing a lot of things that are homesteading, in our little property, even when I was a kid, but that was the more old ways of doing it that kind of just fascinated me, so there was things that inspired me. So I just thought we would talk about a few of the things today that maybe I put the list together. You haven't said whether I told you could add things and you didn't add anything, but so I guess you might agree or disagree with some of these things.
It looked pretty good. I'm trying to remember things. Like it's been a long time.
It's been a long time since I've watched them too, but I think that these things, I think as we talk about it, maybe some things will come. They're kind of broad things that I think just the show overall kind of maybe
the show and the books.
They kind of presents to you. And they're nothing that's like groundbreaking, I don't think here.
No.
That we're going to talk about, but I also think it's a fun topic, and it's something that maybe there's folks who've never watched Little House on the Prairie. We have listeners in other countries, even maybe they don't even know about Little House on the Prairie. Well, it's based on the books by Laura Ingalls Wilder. There are 9 seasons, 204 episodes, spanning from 1974 to 1983. So there's a lot to watch there. And it's just an American drama about a family living on a farm in Walnut Grove, Minnesota, and ranging from the 1870s to the 1890s. So it's, that era.
It's interesting that only covered Walnut Grove, considering the fact that they lived so many places.
Except for the very first episode.
Yeah.
The pilot episode isn't at Walnut Grove. They'd actually settled out west a little, like Kansas, and they actually lost their homestead because they was on the wrong side of the line of where the line was drawn for the territories. And they came in and moved them, and they had to up everything and leave their home basically. And then they landed in Walnut Grove, Minnesota. So that's kind of like the beginning of it. And then, which is actually the Walnut Grove episode is actually the second episode where they land there, which is also probably my favorite episode of the entire series.
Really?
Yeah. I love that episode. It's my favorite.
Gosh, it's been so long that I don't remember exactly.
It's a great one. I can even tell you the title of it. It's called A Harvest of Friends. And I love it. I love that episode. The first episode, the pilot episode is great too, but that's my favorite episode. But the very first thing I think you learn by watching that show is that homesteading is hard work, but it's rewarding because you see them working very hard all the time. It's basically just a foundation of the show is how hard they're working. Paul's always out building something or taking care of animals or, working at the sawmill or, doing something. Ma's always in the kitchen cooking or doing laundry or she's doing something. It's just hard work, but they're happy, they're a happy family.
Yeah.
And the kids, they're smiling when they're working together. And I don't think that's unrealistic. I don't think that it is at all.
Oh, I don't either.
People will think, well, it's a show. Of course they're portraying like they're happy, but it's been my experience that it is hard work and it is rewarding and you are happy about it, and you can have joy while you're doing it.
Yeah. That's been our experience too. And I've been around, a lot of homesteaders. I've gone to a lot of other homesteads, I guess. And, with the family and the kids, and it generally is, you can be working really hard and sweating and doing something maybe not incredibly enjoyable, but it's rewarding and everybody knows
it's not all going to make you smile. But
everybody loves like that, bringing in the harvest, like all that hard work that it took to get there, or getting the fence up, or hatching the eggs for your quail or whatever.
Yeah, even in the moment, maybe it's not the most joyful thing, but I can look. I don't know if I can look back on any of my work and not see that I didn't enjoy it to some degree, or at least recognize how rewarding it was, for my life. So I just think, that's a big message of that show. Is that, it's hard work
and family.
Yeah.
And
for the
family
kids, it's something they really tried to, I think, impart to the kids. That hard work is a part of this life, but it's a joyous part and it's a rewarding part. I told you my favorite episode is the very first episode where they're in Walnut Grove. It's called A Harvest of Friends, and I think that's also another thing that I think is a big message of the show, is the importance of a community of friends. Homesteading, community is important. We've been harping on this for the last year.
Yes,
how important we think community is. That show definitely portrayed that.
It showed it so many ways.
In that very first Walnut Grove episode, which is the second episode, they moved to Walnut Grove. They are, building a community without even knowing it. They get in a jam. They basically, they've made all these friends. They're just doing things for people. People are doing things for them. They're building friendships, and they don't even realize it. But then they're going to have a need real soon. And in that episode, Paul Ingalls he falls out of a tree trying to get a kite for his kids. Breaks his rib, can't finish a job that he has agreed to do in town in trade for plow and seed. Their oxen are up on a that they're gonna have to give up their oxen because he didn't finish the job, but he can't finish the stacking this grain because he's got a broken rib. But the entire community gathers around, goes in, finishes the job for him, even comes out and plows his fields for him and their family. And the kind of the message in that at the end, Laura is saying, that Paul harvested a crop that he didn't even know he planted, a harvest of friends. And that's great. I think it's so important, that as homesteaders, that there's some reality in that, that when there's a need, I've seen people come together, and do things for folks in a homesteading community that, and I won't say it's just in homesteading communities that happens, but I think it's an important part of homesteading communities that you.
Yeah, I think it's important in our lives, period, even if you're not a homesteader. But for homesteaders, we do a lot of labor, and a lot of it is, has to be done, especially if you have animals, and it can't be neglected. And if somebody gets sick or a whole family gets sick, you really need that community to come in around you.
Was it you that shared a video with me here a while back? There was something, it was something they were doing in a community, but they were doing something, making something. I was thinking it was you that shared it with me, but anyway, they were basically showing whoever showed it to me was showing me how fascinating it was that they were doing this one thing. But I wasn't as fascinated by that thing that they were making as by it was an entire community of people coming together to do it. It was like this entire community that was doing this.
I do remember. I don't remember what it was. Now. It was about potato.
Oh yeah.
Was it
starch?
Starch.
Yeah.
And they were making noodles.
But it was like they were making like a ton of it.
It's from another country.
And drying it.
The whole community got together.
It was a community event. Yeah. And that was the most fascinating part of that was how the community came together to get this big job done, and I thought that was really cool.
They used to do that a lot. We just had a local, we have this every year. There's a local thing called an old engine show that we have here. And they would do that a lot back in the day where not everybody could afford these big old steam engines to, separate the wheat and the chaff. And so they would bring these big old steam engines in and they would do everybody's harvest, but it would go from farm to farm to farm. And I think that's where we've been talking about for the last year, how you can't be an island. We're kind of an interdependent community. And there's a lot of people right now moving into communities because they have decided to relocate from the city to a suburb or more rural living to have a homestead. And I would say that's probably one of the most important things you can do to start is get involved in your local community and get to know people.
I agree. So, yeah. And I think it's just it's something the show presented well because there was always people helping people in that show. I mean, you've seen that there was just always a need, which we'll go with our next thing I want to bring out. There's always a need. There's always a struggle. There's always something going on. And it always required help from a community to get through it. It seemed like most of the time that's where they were at. Yep. Which brings us to the next point, which is a message I got from the show, whether they conveyed it well or not, and is be prepared for life struggles. Because I would say a lot of times that show portrayed how they weren't prepared for life struggles. and it made things way worse. Like we've seen crops getting wiped out by hail or a tornado at one point in the show. We've seen, sicknesses,
Locusts.
whatever.
Think
I
they
mean,
just
there's
grasshopper.
always something going on
there
in this
was.
community that was just, but that's life though, isn't it? There is always something going on. It might be the Japanese beetles coming in and wiping out your crop, right? Or something. There's just always something going on, and you just need to be prepared for life struggles. And to be prepared for that, it's, basic preparedness, I think, is important, in our lives.
Yeah.
Have backups for things, have plenty of food on the shelves, have money in the bank. Even, we've seen them struggle with money on that show, right and left. I mean,
yes. That was a huge, food, like food security and
food security. Yeah.
I mean, we're not like the doomsday preppers on, in our podcast, but we both do see the wisdom in having extra and being a little bit prepared. Yeah.
And I would say sometimes that show presented them in a way that they weren't very prepared sometimes.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a negative. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And so I think it was something it taught us, but maybe because they lacked in it a lot of times.
Yeah, it's interesting. So that show was like that. And going to talking about the books
didn't.
Farmer Boy
Yeah.
was the exact opposite. Farmer Boy, which would be eventually Laura's husband, Almanzo, was raised in his family farm. And that whole book is all about how much food they created and put in their pantry and in their cellar. And, so that's where the books varied a little bit with the.
And I think they did it, but then you probably put enough for a year, but then say something comes in and wipes out your entire crop the next year. Now, what do you do?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it was their cash crops too. It was grain they were going to sell to buy the things they want to put up. I mean,
I think the way I understood it was like, Laura's family just really struggled from the beginning financially. And
I think so.
With trying to find their place and we'll
definitely get into that as some of the points go on too about the financial stuff too, because I think it's definitely in there, something we can learn.
They just seemed to struggle more.
But
and I guess there are
definitely a message that we get, even if it's on the lack of sometimes a message. So another thing that I think, as much as we are fascinated by the old ways, I think one of the things we can learn from that show is how blessed we actually are by some modern technology, right? Because I love having a refrigerator. I don't know about you.
A refrigerator is really nice. My freezers, I really like my freezers. Nice. Air conditioning right now for you, because you're protecting 2 pregnant does from this heat.
Wouldn't be an option otherwise, you have electricity to turn a fan on them, you wouldn't have. So,
and I love primitive things. Anybody that's listened for a while knows that I enjoy primitive things, but I'm really thankful for the internet. That's just a huge blessing in my life. I am very thankful for my washing machine.
Yeah.
That is just the drudgery of cleaning clothing.
I'm not going to lie. I like turning a faucet on and having water coming out.
Yeah.
I like that. It's like to carry your buckets in and pour it in a tub and take a bath that way might be a unique experience to have every once in a while, but I don't want to be taking my weekly baths that way. It just doesn't.
And there are people out there that live like that and maybe enjoy it.
And that's good for them. Yeah. It is. But I appreciate some modern technology. I do.
Well, and that's the thing, is you can be a homesteader and still have the internet, and we can use technology to our benefit without it owning us. There's things like automatic chicken doors and electronet fencing. Those are wonderful new inventions that I gladly will make part of my life.
But if there are some things you enjoy in the old ways, you can do those things and have fun with them and experience them. And it's okay, if you like doing them. But there's some things I just enjoy, some modern things, and that show can make you appreciate it. Like you see a little bit of that in the show going on in the background. You're going, yeah, that would stink. And, like they have an ice, they go into town, they got the ice house, and you buy a block of ice it's like, nah, I'm good, or and there's like an episode where, like there's meat that's going bad and people are eating it and they're getting sick. And, it's like, boy, refrigeration would have been nice, wouldn't it? Um, so yeah, I mean, modern technology is awesome in a lot of ways. So that show can prove
modern technology also includes modern medicine.
Yeah.
I mean,
a lot of people will make that statement like, oh, I think I was born in the wrong century. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, there's things to enjoy about that for sure, but there's, have a toothache. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to talk about that later too, but the modern having technology means that we have medications. They didn't have them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what I mentioned a few minutes ago about the finances and the struggles. And one of the things I learned from that show, and you can't help but notice it, is that debt can cause you some problems and should be avoided if possible. Because in the very first episode that I'm talking about at Walnut Grove, one of the first things that comes out of Paul Engel's mouth is, I like to pay for things on, up front. I don't like to do credit, and I'll do that as soon as I get my first crop. So can you give me some credit right now? And every time in every show that he gets a loan or owes somebody something goes wrong and they can't pay it back and they end up in a situation. And it's just a lot of their struggles come from debt. And isn't the truth for most people, right? I mean, debt will cause most people some struggles, and if you can avoid it, it's just best to avoid. And that show shows the struggles of debt really well, how it gets you in trouble. Even though they don't make it a point in the show, if you just open your eyes to the problems they're having in a lot of the shows, a lot of times it's because there was debt involved and they owe somebody and now they can't pay or somebody can't, like there's, one episode where they can't, Paul Ingalls can't get paid working at the sawmill to pay off the Olsons at the store because Hanson's Mill the people that owe them can't pay them. So yes, it's just like this recurring problem of debt all the way around. And it just gets them in trouble, and it can get anybody in trouble, and it gets people today in trouble, even worse because it's so much easier to acquire.
It is. Debt should be avoided at all costs. I realize that it's almost impossible to buy a home now without it, but there's debt that we can avoid.
Yeah. The Dave Ramsey plan's a pretty good idea. He's talking about a house, use debt for a house, and then save for a car, and get out of debt on everything else. And I think that's pretty good idea, because it is hard to buy a house without, there's people who do it. People do it. They buy a house, with zero debt. And that's great if you can ever do it, or if you have that belief and you stick with it. It can be done, but it's probably the only thing that's an appreciating value that really would say, okay, it's worth having some debt on that.
But for sure, like consumer debt with like
bad.
Credit cards and stuff like that.
Yeah. People that get into going and doing the paycheck loans and
that
stuff.
becomes such a vicious circle because they charge so much money for those. And the same with credit card debt. Some of those credit cards are 25%.
I know a homesteader who was new to homesteading, and they put a lot of stuff on credit cards to get started homesteading. And I was gritting my teeth going, I didn't want to say nothing to them, but they're buying the seed for their garden on credit cards. And they're buying, equipment they need on their credit cards. And I'm like, man, I haven't talked to him since. I don't know how it worked out for him, how it's working out for him. But they told me that he's like, well, we're in such a hurry to get into this. We want to just get started, and we don't know how much time we got, because they kind of let fear drive them into it. And so they were just like credit card it just to get it going, because they had fear of like the economy collapsing and things happening. And this was a couple of years ago when COVID was, and it had them worried, and they were just credit carding and everything, putting everything on credit cards. And I was, they started homesteading, but I didn't think that was the best way to do it. So anyway, I think debt can definitely cause you some problems, and the show portrayed that. One thing we did see though was that bartering is a great way to do business, and we've seen a lot of that in that show. There was a lot of barter. There was barter with labor. There was barter with items. Ma took her eggs every day into to Olson store to do trading.
Barter for her cloth so she could make dresses.
That's right. Cloth and sugar and flour they needed for cooking or whatever. Which is cool.
I think that was really commonplace then.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
But I think it's kind of having a little bit of a comeback.
I think so too. Yeah,
I think it's really cool.
I think it's a good idea too. I think it's something that can be beneficial and especially on a local community. If you can get a lot of folks, a lot of local businesses and things, and a lot of farmers, because that's something that we're seeing happen a lot. A lot of homesteaders are starting home-based businesses on whatever they do. I mean, some of them, it may not even be directly homestead related. They might be running a mechanic shop out of their garage, or a welding shop out of their barn, or they might be doing some blacksmith work, or we're seeing a lot of homesteaders do businesses on their homesteads that may not be necessarily directly homestead related, but they're doing homestead businesses. And those services are definitely something that could be bartered, Yeah,
you can barter your time, just a time exchange, 2 hours of this for 2 hours of that.
Absolutely.
I think that I think the barter economy is definitely starting to come back for sure. And I think it's a really good way to put value on people's time.
Yeah, I think so too. And I liked it. I remember an episode where she's taking her eggs into the store and she's picking them up and looking at them, criticizing them. Well, the brown ones aren't really people don't really like those as well. And she's putting them back in the basket. And I love it. She just snatches her basket up and says, okay, I'll take them somewhere else. And she just takes off with them. Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
She was trying to talk her down on how much she was actually going to give her for them towards the bill, towards her flour and sugar.
Well, that's always how the Olsons were.
Yeah, I know. They were the most entertaining. But if it wouldn't have been for the Olsons, would the show been near as entertaining?
Right.
Absolutely not. You got to have the Olsons.
But I loved that Ma went in there and, like you said, she got her sugar and her, and her, not her eggs, and her fabric just from her egg money. And I remember that being a thing. You read that in old journals all over the place of the egg money, the egg barter. Like eggs were like their own currency at a time. What's
funny is people were paying Doc Baker with chickens. They were giving him like chicken flocks, because that's how the Ingalls actually got their chicken flock. Was right in the beginning. He helps him fix a wheel on his wagon, and he gives him some chickens.
Yeah,
because he said people have been paying him with chickens, so he just pays him with the chickens, which I thought was kind of funny, So we're just seeing this like you said, barter economy just rotating around, which was kind of fun, And I think it's really cool too, and better than money in some ways,
Yeah.
So I think that was a good thing about the show. You see a lot of that. Something I noticed, because I'm a builder, I'm a fixer, I like to do things, is that having tools is really important. And Paul is always carrying that wooden toolbox that he made, he's got a shoulder strap, and he's carrying it around all the time, and he's fixing stuff, and he's building stuff, and he had his tools, and the tools were really important. He built their house, he built their barn, he built the fences, he built, he's building everything.
And he was always fixing a horse trailer or something.
And he was doing it for other people, and he was trading labor for, and making money and getting things, because he had tools, and he couldn't have done any of that without tools. And
Ma had her own tools.
She had the cooking tools, the tools,
and her sewing machine, and her sewing,
absolutely. Tools were a big part of that show, and without them tools, they wouldn't have been able to do the things they did. And right off the bat, he needed a plow. That's a tool, and he had to do some things to get that tool, because that's how important that tool was, to break that sod, to get that crop, to do the things. And tools are just an important part of homesteading.
For them then, their horse or their oxen were tools. Yes, and now for us, it would be, you might have maybe a tractor or something.
Or whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
The tools are, for the most part, still the same, though, if you think about it.
What they do, it's just they're motorized, run off electricity.
Right. Yeah, we still need saws. We still need, bowls and knives and it's pretty wild.
And I just love that they made that a big part of the show, that you'll see an opening scene a lot of times, Paul doing something with a tool, and it just, or Ma doing something with a tool. And I always thought that was kind of neat how they would open it. It would be some old, primitive tool that was used in that era. And it was a show off of how they could do, how those tools operated, during that time. And I just thought it was fascinating. And we could do the same thing today with more modern tools, you know, and
Well,
show you
and you said I didn't add anything. So now that we're talking about this, I will add this.
13 things.
13 things. Skills.
Yeah. Well, the skills. Yeah. And I thought about that.
With the tools. They
And
showed
a lot of these
that
do involve skills. So
Yeah.
that's why I was thinking it. But yeah, you got to have, Paul had
have the skills to use those tools.
Yeah, he had to have the skill. They all had to have skills, and homesteaders did need to have skills back then. And you know, you weren't. A lot of them had a special skill. I would say carpentry work was Paul Engel's special skill.
Yeah, much.
And you know, different ones had different skills, but I think most of them had the kind of jack of all trades skills. You know, you had to be okay at a lot of things.
Yes.
As a homesteader back then. And I think it's even important today to have a variety of skills. You know, I think it's important to have some carpentry skills and some, building skills, mechanic skills, and, you know, be able to do a few things, you know, having your animal husbandry skills. And, you know, there's just things you need to, in a broad picture. You can definitely specialize in some things though.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. Then I think it was imperative that you had, that you were multi-skilled.
Because if not,
now I think
you can get
now I think you can get away with maybe not having as many, but I do think that it's important, especially on a homestead. Like in normal life, I don't know if you need all those skills, but as a homesteader, it is really helpful. It helps you go back to the one we just talked about. It helps you financially.
Yeah.
Yeah, to have some skills. Like if you can fix your lawnmower, or you can fix something, or you can build your own fence, it certainly helps you go a long way with that financial.
You could have one great skill that provides for you financially and use your finances to pay for those things. I mean, Doc Baker had one skill.
He was a doctor. Yeah.
You know, and so he had to pay or trade or barter his services for the things he needed done, you know, and so it happened then too, I'm sure as well. But just like today, you can make the money with that one skill to pay for the other things to get done. But generally in homesteading, it's a good thing to have a broad array of skills for sure. And be able to do your things that you want to do. So yeah, you do. You're right. It's a great point. That was something in the show that we see constantly. And Paul could do anything. He could do anything except for save money, evidently, which we'll get back into here in a minute. Frugal living was something I wanted to point out. Frugal living and homesteading go hand in hand, and it did for them on the show. You see them living frugally. You know, they didn't have a lot of extra things. They had what they needed. They didn't have anything else, you know, and you didn't have closets full of clothes. They didn't have, all the extra things that.
Right. Their places were small and modest. Their homes were, that is something I think frugality is huge.
And it's not required in homesteading by any means.
No.
I just think for a lot of homesteaders, I think it's something that they strive for, because I think frugal living and homesteading equals simple living, and simple living equals slow living, and slow living is nice.
Yeah.
And when you're busy all the time, now we have busy seasons for sure, but I'm not always busy. You know, wintertime is definitely a slow season, and midsummer sometimes is a slow season, you know, and you have some slow seasons, and that's a relaxing season. And when you have too much stuff and you're not frugal, there's not much slow season. For me anyway.
You end up, for me, you end up having to work a lot to keep things going if you're not frugal.
Right. And so to have a slow homesteading life and a simple homesteading life, you're kind of required to have a frugal homesteading life. So and I think that you see some of that in that show, people living simply and having a slower life to some degree. I mean,
enjoying the simple things, enjoying
the simple things,
the walk and enjoying it. Like they did this a lot. They did a lot of picnics, you know, enjoying a picnic is a simple life thing that's frugal. And, I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Mr. Edwards. Mr. Edwards had a really slow life.
Yeah.
Because he didn't require much. That guy didn't own hardly anything, and he lived real simple.
Yeah.
Especially early on before he got married and had a kid, right? They had an adopted kid, right? But in the early season, he was a single guy. He's living super simple, and he'd go around just helping out, and doing things. And he had a super slow life, and very frugal, very, very frugal life. Didn't require much of anything. So yeah, you see a lot of that in the show. This is one I thought you would think a lot of, because we were talking about this the other day. Injuries and sickness cause some homestead struggles. So safety and health should be a major focus, and you see that in the show all the time. Most of the drama is either because somebody's hurt or somebody's sick, and it happens a lot in that show. And
I was thinking about that with Mary. I mean, Mary lost her eyesight due to scarlet fever, and but it was
saying, Paul broke his rib in the first episode, because he's climbing a tree and being dangerous. They didn't,
and that's where I'm thankful for antibiotics, because but the safety is huge. And when you're using, we were just talking about, we're thankful for equipment and modern equipment, but a lot of that also requires that you be safe and have safety equipment. And chainsaws require safety equipment,
but sometimes you just do stupid things that you don't need to do too, and you can get yourself hurt.
Yes.
You should avoid doing stupid things so you don't have stupid accidents for the most part. And sometimes it didn't happen, right?
And the older you get, the more you think about some of these things. Like I've stopped jumping out of the bed of the truck.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still can.
That. Right.
I still can. But at almost 50, it's probably not a good idea. Number one, I'd probably be fine, but I can't afford a broken ankle or a sprained ankle. I don't have time for it.
I still do those things, and then my knees remind me that I shouldn't be doing those things.
Yeah. So now I take my time to get out of the bed of the truck instead of jumping. So, but an injury can set you back for so long, and a sickness can. I mean, sickness you can't do much about, but an injury we could probably circumvent. Sickness you can. I mean, we've talked about that on here about eating healthy and living healthy, but sometimes sickness just happens. I mean, we just went through a period of a couple of years with sickness going around. So
and back then it was even worse. I mean, there was things going around and they didn't have vaccines for, and things things were just worse. And like I mentioned earlier, no refrigeration, so there's a chance that there's spoilage and there's bad food, and
they just didn't know then what we know now.
We just didn't know. But again, you could definitely get careless and do things. You could not can something properly. You need to pay attention to those things. You need to make sure that you're doing things in a right way, so you don't put yourself in a situation where you could get sick or get hurt, working on your homestead. It happens. I mean, every week I've got blood coming from a part of my hand or leg, because I've done something, got into something, or, but it just happens, so
you try to be smart about it, though. I got I think I told you this story. I got my hori knife, and the first thing out of my husband's mouth was, "You're going to hurt yourself with that."
It's a big knife.
I cut myself the first day I owned it.
Pretty sharp knife. Yeah.
I did not want to tell him, because he was right.
It's
just, it's that kind of stuff. I didn't get very hurt, but just being careful, with your knife skills and all of those, all of that. Yeah.
But and just depending on what you're doing too. I mean, it's like I can get poked with some chicken wire and it'll make you bleed, but it's not a major injury. You start messing with chainsaws, there's a whole nother level of being careful there. So it's just something that the show, you notice it because every episode nearly somebody's sick or hurt or something. It's just like most of those shows have some kind of drama going on like that. So it's just something I noticed in those shows. And it's a big message of the show and I think is an intentional message of the show, is that money doesn't equal happiness. And it's just true. They didn't have money and they were happy.
Right.
The Olsons had the money and weren't happy all the time. There are not all the times they
Yeah.
were very unhappy. And they make that a big point of the show, I think. So that was something they were trying to convey. And I think it is absolutely true. I mean, it won't buy, people say, well, we'll buy you happiness, but it'll buy you a boat or it'll buy you whatever, make you happy. There's true. Being broke, it will not necessarily make you happy either.
Right. Yeah.
But the money itself isn't what makes you happy. So, that's a simple and that's a broad message for beyond homesteading, but it is something the show just, I think, conveyed really well.
Yeah, it was really obvious.
Yeah. It was a theme of the show because there was an episode called The Richest Man in Walnut Grove, and it's talking about Charles Ingle. He wasn't the richest man by money, but he was viewed that
as
way
the richest man because he was happy,
because of he was blessed in his family life. He was blessed in their homestead and the way they done things. Is just everything. There was a lot of love in the family. And yeah, he was considered by Nels Olson the richest man in Walnut Grove because of his life. Or it was because Nels had a crush on Carolyn and maybe he was just, I don't know. It could have been. I don't know.
That was the way they did shows in the 70s. So
maybe that one part of it. I don't know. Anyway. And I think another part of something we see that they try to convey, I think, a lot with Pa Ingalls, with Charles Ingalls especially, is having an enterprising mindset is helpful. And he was always, in business, doing something, wheeling and dealing. He had an enterprising mindset. He was a business in the show. He's a businessman, I mean, didn't always work out well for him, but I mean, they were always looking for a way to earn some extra money doing this or
some kind of side hustle somewhere.
Yeah, he had side hustles going on. I think everything was a side hustle. I mean, he worked at the mill, but it was only part-time. I think everything was a side hustle. I think every money-making venture was a side hustle.
Yeah, the homestead, I think, was his main thing.
Yeah. So every work.
But just having that mindset of turning things into an opportunity.
Yeah. You remember the Christmas episodes where they would, there was a couple of them, but the one in particular where they are all doing some kind of a side thing to buy gifts for the others that others are doing something, but they're always giving up something or doing something.
Yes, they were always very
but it ended up the other ones were like, for example, Laura was selling her horse to Nellie to buy stuff for the family, but they were getting a saddle for the horse. And it was like this rotation thing. It's like they were all, each one of them were doing something. And then but the other had given up the thing that applied to. And I don't know, it was kind of funny, but side note. But again, they were going out of their way. They were figuring out a way to get what they needed, to get what they. And I think that's a homesteading mindset. You figure out ways to get the things you need to, unless you're just going to use credit cards and then it's out the window. But the right way to do it is really just figure out a way to do it. Figure out a way. Can you sell something you don't use anymore to get the thing you need, the one you want? Can you do a service? Can you make something and sell that? Or, I mean, you just you try to think outside the box and you have an enterprising mindset. And I think that's part of homesteading. I really do. And I think that show conveyed it well.
I do too.
Yeah. I think a big message of the show and something I picked up on even as a kid is the homesteading life is much more than growing food, and that much more might be different for everyone. For the Ingalls family, it was faith and it was family and it was a lot of things. For others, it was different, but it's much more than just growing food. The homesteading life is all encompassing of your life and what you want your life to be like. And that can include a lot of things, and it is, for me, I
think it's still that way. Yeah. I see it that way. It's really not, if you look back at the history of homesteading, even outside of the Ingalls, I think it's still very much the same way. It's, God, family, country.
Yeah.
And freedom.
Yeah.
And I see that way still.
To me, all those things intertwine in homesteading.
That's what makes. And I think
they all play a part in it. Yeah, to me.
Yeah, and I think that the show showed that so much. the books, that theme is the same in the books too.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And
it was in what was important for their family.
Yeah, and they did it. I think it wasn't so much that Pa could not have found a different job, but he chose that job because it had made him available to his family and to his community. And
And you mentioned earlier, that music was coming from that was inspiration for your daughter. Their homestead had music in it. Their homestead had laughter in it, and a lot of fun. I mean, it's just that all this stuff was part of their homestead, and I think it is like that for everybody. It was like music isn't a part of my homestead, but it's part of your homestead. But then there's things in my homestead that aren't part of homestead. It's like everybody's homestead is different. When I use that term, it's not just the provision part of the homestead. It's the life. It's the homesteading life.
It is. It's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle. And that lifestyle it looks different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And for some, faith is going to be a major part of it. And some, it isn't. And for some, business is going to be a huge part of it. And some it isn't. And so, I mean, it's just that is different for everybody. But for everybody, it's so much more than just growing food.
Yeah. So I don't know anybody that it's just about the feeding themselves.
But I think when folks that aren't homesteaders look at homesteaders, they think it's about growing food.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to explain what it's about though.
Yeah.
Because it's no matter what it is for you, it's a mindset, and it's not something that you can really, at least for me, it's not something that I can really describe.
You can define homesteading, and then I think you go beyond that with the homesteading life, because I think homesteading is about self-sufficiency, sustainability. It really is, and all the things that can contribute to that. But then when you add it to your life, it's just the life brings in so much more of it. I don't know. It is a thing that's hard to totally
put words to.
Yeah, but it is bigger than just growing food. Absolutely. It's bigger to me than self-sufficiency and sustainability. There is more to it.
And
it's
I think
about
we can
family,
all,
and
we can all individualize it and make it ours and still call it homesteading. Like that whole idea that it can't be a homestead if I think it can be a homestead. It's a state of mind. It
can be about preparedness. It can be about legacy and leaving something for your children.
And that's why we say you can do it. I mean, that's why I believe you can do it in the city. You can do it in an apartment. You can do it on 100 acres.
I agree.
It's a mindset. It's
I think so too. So those are the 12 plus one things you can that you can get, that I got we got from watching Little House on the Prairie.
Now I want to go watch it. It's raining out, and I want to just watch.
Yeah, I actually watched one episode today when I was.
Did you really?
I was this morning. I got up. I was like, "Hey, we got this. We're going to talk about this today." I said, "I'm going to kick up an episode and watch it," and I just threw one up, and that's why I brought up the first one a couple times at Walnut Grove, because that's the one I watched.
Yeah, I must
kind of hit it for me.
I must say, I still have all of the books on the list that we have.
Well, that being said, we did put some links in here for the 9-volume book set that you can get for Little House on the Prairie, for the Little House rather, and then the Little House on the Prairie, the complete series on DVD. Right now, you can watch it, I think, for free on Amazon. I think they do so. that freebie or whatever. I think you can watch it on that for free. So go, watch it. You added some other stuff in here.
Well, when we did this, so my kids, we really got into this, and it just kind of sucked us in. And so we read the books, and then there's a Little House cookbook. So we cooked some of the stuff in it, and there's Little House sewing book and Little House craft book. And we did that. And then there's something we homeschooled, which a lot of people know. And we did something called the Prairie Primer, which is actually, I guess, kind of hard to find. So the link for that's pretty long. But the Prairie Primer was a homeschool curriculum built around the Little House series. And it was pretty fun. You even dissected a buffalo eye.
That's crazy.
Yep.
That's fun.
So
Yeah,
it did
neat stuff.
science and everything. So it was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed it. And
You're obviously a Laura Ingalls Wilder fan. I mean,
yeah,
your website is actually partially
yes,
inspired by
it
that.
is. It is. Bree
rewilderlife.com.
Wilder Life is a play on her last name. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
this is obviously something
She
you
had
were
just a
inspired by it.
massive impact on myself and our family.
I think the show,
Yeah.
I mean, it took me years to maybe even realize it, but the show I think made a huge impact on me growing up. Even though we were doing a lot of the things we were home. I mean, we were homesteaders. I mean, we really were.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't call it that or anything or even recognize it as that, but we had chickens and pigs and gardens and we're doing the things and, and we were homesteading in a lot of ways. But I think the show probably even instilled more of the desire for taking it further than what our homestead ever did.
I think the popularity of the books and the TV show still to this day show the impact that it had on an entire generation of people.
I wonder, that the back to the land movement happened, during that time.
It
when that
did.
Out. I wonder
You're
if that show
right.
was a major inspiration for that or motivation for that.
That's true.
Could have been.
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah. So yeah, it was just I enjoyed the show. I still enjoy the show occasionally when I watch it. I haven't watched it for years other than today. I just kind of kicked one up. But I just remember it being a fun part of my childhood that just did something for me, that put something in me that to this day is still there, and I think there are lessons. I had to think about it a little bit, like, what did I really get from that? And as I was putting those kind of things together. And yeah, I think I did get all those things from that show and probably a lot more that I don't even know.
Probably.
Because the show wasn't about homesteading.
It wasn't.
It was just in the background happening. And you picked up on it, So
this little town, and that as we were kicking around show subjects to do for today, when you mentioned that, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like fun.
And I think it has been fun. So it brought back to my mind a lot of the episodes that I was just thinking.
It's been so long. I need to watch some. I think I've more recently read the books, and of course, there's many books after that too that were written. But yeah. And I've read a few
twice a week, sit down and watch an episode just to kind of be reminded of, or just skip through and find the ones that they look really good to you and just watch those or something. I mean, there's some that are in there that are really good.
And they're also wonderful thing. It's a wonderful show that you can watch with your kids or grandkids. That's wholesome.
Yeah.
And
And there's some good life lessons in there. There is other than, beyond homesteading, there's just some good life lessons in there about integrity and just being a good person and helping others and a lot of things. There's a lot of lessons in there. There's a lot of pickles these kids get into that they wouldn't get into if they weren't doing something wrong, and so it kind of teaches you a lesson. Don't do those things, right? I mean, it's just a good show. So it is a good family show. So I think that's all we have for that today. You have anything you want to add? No, I think that's it. Well, folks, I hope you got something out of it. I mean, we didn't really teach you anything about homesteading today, but hopefully we inspired you that you could go back and maybe watch some Little House and be inspired further to, kind of dwell on some of these things and let them, here, I'm the type of person that, just on the last note here, that I benefit more from inspiration and motivation than I do from education. I know that seems weird because I'm the kind of guy I can figure something out. I'll just look at something long enough, I kind of figure it out. But I don't want to go figure it out if I'm not inspired and motivated. Right. Yes. So I need something to inspire me and motivate me a lot. So it's why I watch a lot of YouTube or read a lot of books, or they're not even things that I'm learning because it's stuff I already know, but I'll watch these things to be inspired and be energized to get out and get after it. And it helps me. It actually does motivate me and get me up and get me moving. And so I think an episode like this today is about that. This is a tool that can do that. It can motivate you, get you excited about the lifestyle, and get you doing things that maybe you never did before, or that you've lost some of your joy for doing them because it just feels like a burden of labor instead of something that you've forgotten you enjoyed. Yeah. A show like this can set you on fire for that again. It really can. It does me anyway.
And we have to have fun and have some enjoyable downtime too. So
that's right. There you go. So, well, folks, that's all I have for you today. And until next time, happy homesteading. God bless.
And grow where you're planted.
Looking around, I finally see I think I need a change. The rat race, I wanna flee. My world, I'll rearrange. I'm getting back to the roots of how it's meant to be. Growing gardens, picking fruit, racing livestock, living free. It's a modern homestead. Build a modern homestead. A lot of folks don't understand why I wanna live this way. They've never eaten from their land like we do here every day. Snapping beans like Grandma did, sitting on her front porch. Hunting and fishing like a kid once you've done all of your chores. It's a modern homestead. Build a modern homestead. Country or city, there's a way to make this change. You gotta start today.